But it focuses on the villains of the story. There's reference to... Is my chair getting lower? Did I start this video out higher? I feel like I did. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a huge end of the year book haul. It has been a couple of months since I've been able to film and share reading things with you, and so I'm just doing one big gigantic book haul that encompasses pretty much the last 3 months of 2019. First, as always, I'm going to start by showing you the book of the month books that I picked out. There were a couple of I think both in November and December. I don't know. I think in November I got 3 books from book of the month, and then in December I just got the one. But 4 books to show you. First is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I don't know if I need to go into much about it. It's a very popular book across BookTube, but it's basically about 8 secret societies at Yale University, and we follow a girl who is given the opportunity to sort of infiltrate them. It's an adult fantasy novel, and I've heard very mixed things about it, but having no preconceived notions about Leigh Bardugo in particular, I'm hoping that it's a more successful read for me. Next we have The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. Again, another super popular book. This is the story of a woman who inherits a manor or mansion from her birth family. She had been adopted, and there's kind of this whole, she discovers the secrets, I guess, of you know, what happened to her family within this home prior to her adoption, and it all had to do with another family living in the home at that time. Next, this is my December pick. This is The Wives by Tarryn Fisher, and it's the story of a few women who, unbeknownst to them, are all married to the same man, and then what happens when they discover the truth and who each other is. I've read Tarryn Fisher in the past, and I don't recall specifics because it was quite a while ago, but I do remember being very impressed at how affected I was by a couple of her books, and so I was really excited that this was offered as a book of the month. I had planned on getting it anyway. I had it pre-ordered, and I went ahead and canceled my pre-order and picked up the book of the month copy. And then lastly, from book of the month, we have The Chestnut Man. This is by Soren Sveistrup. This was the book of the month in a month that I actually passed on. It came out immediately after I had read The Whisper Man, and it felt too familiar or similar to that book, so I actually skipped it. And then people were saying great things about it, and people were saying, I can't believe you didn't get it, and it's really good. So I went back later and included it as an add-on in, I think, my November box. So The Chestnut Man is a crime thriller, and it is the story of a serial killer in Copenhagen who leaves behind 2 chestnuts and a stick figure man. So it sounds very much like The Whisper Man meets The Chalk Man, only it's The Chestnut Man. The discovery is there's a fingerprint on one of the killer's trademarks left behind at a crime scene that actually belongs to a young girl who went missing in the prior year. And so the case explodes at that point, and you know, I don't know much more about it. I have heard that it's pretty gory for a crime thriller, and so hey, count me in, I guess. If you've watched my channel for a while, you'll get a kick out of this next one. I picked up Down to the Woods by M.J. Arlidge. I need to sit down and binge the Helen Grace series of books by this author. This is the 8th, I believe, and it also sounds pretty gruesome. It's the story of our detective, Helen Grace, and she is trying to catch a serial killer who stalks and kills his victims in the woods. So Next, I picked up They All Fall Down. This is by Rachel Howzell Hall. This is a book that I've had my eye on since it came out, which was pretty recently, April of 2019. But it is a closed circle mystery. It's about these 7 strangers. Yes, 7 strangers who are invited to go to this tropical island paradise. I don't know if they think they've won a trip or how it goes, but they get to the island and soon it's revealed that they each have a secret and that they're all connected, and then they all fall down, referring to one by one they start to perish, die. A lot of the author's biography paints her as a crime thriller serial writer, but this is a standalone novel. She was also a co-author with James Patterson on a book, so I've been really excited about it. I don't know, it's just one of those books that immediately sparks something. You're immediately drawn to it, and I finally got a copy. Next, I picked up One Night Gone. This was actually a pre-order off of Amazon. I had seen it, and I was cruising for new releases, and I saw this one. Something about it immediately sparked my interest. It's about the disappearance of a woman named Maureen, who arrives at this seaside town called Opal Beach, and she's starting her life over, but immediately, or almost immediately, she ends up disappearing. And then decades into the future, or current day, we follow Allison Simpson, and she's house sitting at the home in Opal Beach, and she stumbles upon the mystery of this missing girl named Maureen, and so she is determined to get to the bottom of it. I don't know. Blurbed by Paul Tremblay as a timely and timeless mystery that will keep you obsessively reading well past your bedtime. It just is one of those books that I just immediately became interested in. I don't know. It didn't have to work very hard to catch my interest. Next, I picked up a copy of The Passengers by Jahn Mars. If you have been watching, you know that one of my favorite thrillers of all time is called The One by Jahn Mars, and on my to-do list is reading more Jahn Mars novels to find out if he is a favorite author. I've heard really great things about The Passengers. It is about a future, a not so distant future, of self-driving cars that are basically hacked or taken over, and the passengers are told that people on social media are going to decide which ones of them live and which ones of them die. And I just know from my experience reading the one with Jahn Mars, he has a writing style that I absolutely love. At least I hope it's a consistent writing style. I guess I shouldn't make assumptions, but I was just really impressed with his short, bursty, fast-paced writing style that was very accessible and just kept me reading compulsively. So I am looking forward to reading this big time. I don't even remember where this one came from. Probably Book Outlet. But it's called The Stolen Ones. This is by Richard Montanari. This is the story of a man who, it says, grew up in a place called Cold River, which is a psychiatric facility for the criminally insane. And when that psychiatric hospital closed its doors, it says that Luther never left. He roams the catacombs beneath Philadelphia, channeling the violent dreams of Edward Cross, 20th century Europe's most prolific serial killer. And so there are 2 detectives who are trying to solve a string of murders in Philadelphia. And I guess it's unclear if this Luther character is the bad guy or the one to blame, the perpetrator, if you will, or if somebody else is doing all of these things. I don't even remember buying it, but I'm not mad that I did. Okay, next we have A People's Future of the United States, speculative fiction from 25 extraordinary writers, most notably Sean McGuire. It says the editors asked for narratives that would challenge oppressive American myths, release us from the chokehold of our history, and give us new futures to believe in. So this sounds like a really intriguing anthology to me. And it says it results, it's a spectacular collection of dark and light, the dystopian and the utopian. So I'm just really excited to put this on my list of anthologies that I have to read, which I said would be a goal of mine, and it's still a goal of mine. I just haven't done it. We'll talk more about that in another video. Next, I picked up Before I Go to Sleep. This is by S.J. Watson. This is the story of a woman who doesn't have the ability to form new memories. So think of 50 First Dates, where she has no long-term memory, only short-term memory. She wakes up every morning and her husband has to explain her life to her all over again. But she's been working with a therapist to journal things that go on in her day-to-day life. And as she goes and sits down with this therapist and reads past entries, it starts to become clear that maybe her husband's not being 100% honest with her. It's not new. It's a book from 2011, so I've just never read it. It says it's being adapted into a major motion picture, but I doubt that result of that is 50 First Dates. I think this one is probably a little bit more intense than that. I have another anthology here called The Mad Scientist's Guide to World Domination. Again, everything the friendly local evil genius needs to be invincible. This one sounds maybe a little bit more lighthearted than the last, but again, speculative, science fiction-y, and another one that features Sean and McGuire. This one also features Diana Gabaldon. It focuses on the villains of the story, so I thought it sounded fun, and again, another great candidate for my anthologies project. Next, I have another book by M.J. Arlidge. This is A Gift for Dying. This is actually not part of the Helen Grace series. This is a standalone novel by the author, and I'm interested in it because of the story, not because of the author and my obsessive need to buy each one of his titles, even though I've never read his work. But this is the story of a teenager named Cassie who can look at you and tell when you're going to die. And how. That's a fascinating concept, number one. Number two, it's also a concept that I toyed with in my own writing when I was in college. I had a creative writing course. I wrote a story about a doctor an emergency room doctor who worked on a woman, and that woman passed along to her the ability to know when people are going to die. She could touch them and tell when they were going to die. A complicated ability to have as a doctor, right? And so it was just a short story. Like, it didn't even go anywhere. It was just her getting this gift and then sort of like throwing away her career and her relationships because it was too difficult. People wanted to know. She didn't want to know. And anyways, so that's why I'm super interested in that particular story. Next, I picked up Lost by Sharon Bolton, and I bought this because I had hauled another Sharon Bolton book months ago, and I got a lot of comments that encouraged me to read it and expected me to really like this author. So the book is Lost. It is about a serial killer who drains young boys of their blood. I don't know if there's any supernatural elements here or if this is just a serial killer who sort of mimics that most famous blood draining type of killer. Next, I picked up 5 Minutes Alone. This is by Paul Cleave. Paul Cleave is another one of those authors that I just seem to accumulate books from and will one day read. Perhaps binge all of them. 5 Minutes Alone is kind of a follow-up novel to Joe Victim. But anyways, it's about two characters from Joe Victim. The characters labeled the Coma Cops. Rapists are dying. Convicted rapists are dying. And come to find out, someone is allowing the victims of these individuals to exact revenge upon them. And it says, unfortunately, innocent people start to die, and so these detectives have to get involved. But remind me not to read this one before I read Joe Victim, because that sounds like something I would accidentally do. Next, I have The Plea by Steve Cavanagh. I picked this up off of Book Outlet because I read The Arc of 13 by Steve Cavanagh, which is book, what did we decide, 3 or 4 in this series featuring Eddie Flynn. Yes, Eddie Flynn is a con artist turned defense attorney, and I really enjoyed the book 13. This one precedes it, so I've probably already read some spoilers for Eddie Flynn's character. However, it is a separate storyline to the other 13. You guys will probably recognize this, just like Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. It's got a little bit of dust on it because it's been sitting here for a while. Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. This is super popular because The Perks of Being a Wallflower, his prior book, was super popular. This is a complete 180 from that, where The Perks of Being a Wallflower was kind of like this coming of age story. Imaginary Friend is a straight up horror novel about an imaginary friend. No. It's about a boy who has just settled in a new town with his single mother, and he goes missing for 6 days, and then when he returns, he's not the same, and he has with him an imaginary friend, or at least a voice in his head. So, creepy. And as much as people talked about this book, I honestly can't say that I've heard much about it. I can think of 2 people that I watch regularly that I know read it, but I didn't seek out their final thoughts on the book, so I don't have any idea if this is good, bad. Yeah. One of the pre-orders towards the end of the year for me was Elevator Pitch by Linwood Barclay. It all begins on a Monday when 4 people board an elevator in a Manhattan office tower. Each presses a button for their floor, but the elevator proceeds nonstop to the top. Once there, it pauses for a few seconds, but the doors don't open. Instead, the elevator begins to descend, floor by floor. Then it plummets, right to the bottom of the shaft. It appears to be a random accident, the kind of thing that seems to happen all too often in a city like New York. But on Tuesday, it happens again, in a different Manhattan skyscraper. And then Wednesday brings yet another tragic high-rise catastrophe. In only 3 days, one of the most vertical cities in the world and the nation's capital of media, finance, and entertainment is plunged into chaos. So I just remember thinking, oh my God, that sounds super interesting. And I had to pre-order it. It sounds very similar to me to The Passengers by John Mars, but I have no idea if this author writes anything like John Mars does. I just think it sounded great. This isn't the first Linwood Barclay novel that I've purchased. It's also not the last. And so hopefully I really enjoy his work, because I have another one called Fear the Worst. This is the story of a man whose daughter, who's of age, I guess. It says teenage, but she works in a hotel. His daughter comes to stay with him to work this job in the hotel, and then one day she doesn't come back. And she's gone missing. He's desperate to find her, but realizes that there's some pretty scary people looking for her as well. And so it's a race against time for the father to try to find his daughter before these other people do, because he'll definitely never see her again if these other people find her first. So next, I picked up Find You in the Dark. This is a novel by Nathan Ripley. This is the story of a man fascinated with serial killers and killers in general, and he sort of solves crimes before the police have a chance to, and then he finds the victims or finds the evidence and calls it into the police. And it's sort of like this ego boost, this taunting game for him, but he thinks he's solved another one, and when he arrives to determine if he's correct, he actually stumbles upon a more recent murder, and so he's found the body, but then the police are informed of it, only he's not the person who called this time. So it's kind of like this guy who's obsessed with serial killers and this serial killer going to battling each other to prove, one's trying to prove that the other did it and only one of them did it. God, that was a terrible explanation. But anyways, serial killers. That's all you need to know. It's what it always comes down to here on this channel. But next I bought The Dispatcher. This is by Ryan David Jahn. It's about the dispatcher. He gets a call from his 14-year-old daughter who was declared dead 4 months earlier. But really she was kidnapped 7 years ago. And so now the father is reinvigorated and trying to track down his daughter. Now that he knows she's not dead, she's alive. What follows is a bullet-strewn cross-country chase from Texas to California along Interstate 10. A wild ride in a 1965 Mustang that passes through the outlaw territory of No Country for Old Men and is shot through with moments of macabre violence that call to mind the novels of Thomas Harris. Charlaine Harris also says, a well-written, fast-paced book along the order of Quentin Tarantino and with a long and bloody trail to the end. So it sounds very gritty, but I just thought it sounded super interesting when I saw it, so of course I had to buy it. I picked up the book Jack and Sadie. This is by J.B. Salsbury. I've had really good experiences with J.B. Salsbury. She writes some pretty gritty, dark romances. Split by J.B. Salsbury is one that I really liked, about a man who has split personality disorder. Wrecked is another one, about a man with PTSD. This, I think, is a little bit more, it's a little bit closer to new adult. It's a second chance romance about two young people who, promised each other the world when one of them went off to college, only it fizzled out. And when he returns, she is very different. He wants her back. She wants nothing to do with him. And there's some mystery that we're trying to figure out regarding what happened to her while he was away. Again, just because I'm really a fan of J.B. Salsbury. She writes very flawed characters in her romance novels. Flawed in ways that they can't help, not flawed like they're just jerks, flawed like, a PTSD or split personality disorder. I mean, they can't really help it, but they still sort of, deserve love and this great romance. So I just thought I'd give this one a try, even though, no, I'm not a huge fan of new adult romance, but we'll see how it goes. So that is my gigantic end of the year book haul. It just encompasses months of buying things that I haven't had an opportunity to tell you guys about yet. If you have any questions about the titles that I mentioned, feel free to fire those at me in the comment section down below. Also, tell me if you have any experience with any of these books, because I'd really like to know which ones might be worth reading sooner rather than later. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.